In 2005, you had a controversial lecture.
I asked this trick question to people. What is happening to our exports? It's shrunk by 26% a year.
You have dedicated your life to create India a product nation. Why do we need to make India a product nation?
If India is not able to do that well, then India will be a big country but not an important country. We'll just be a consumer of other people's AI, and that may well lead to digital colonization.
What's the mindset which will lead us to a product nation?
If you have to be amongst the top 3 or 4, it will not come easy. Vivekananda said, if you really want to do something well, devote your life to one idea.
How should a 22-year person can become next layer like a hens?
You don't pick the winner. You create a winning ecosystem. We should unlearn this idea of creating winners. China as a communist country picked this up very quickly. An ordinary Chinese, an ordinary Japanese, an ordinary American too says, if something equally good is available from my own country, I'll buy that. An ordinary Indian is not yet thinking like that because we don't have faith in our own country.
How you came, with the idea of UPI?
That's where iSPIRT comes in. Indians have the capability. Talent is the same. They come from the same place. So what is missing here is because of social media, everybody has become a opportunities are still there in plenty. But what is not there is the mindset of the people.
Hi everyone, I'm your host Shivank and we are part of the 01 Network by Zerodha. Together, we intend to bring you insights from the top thinkers in the field of entrepreneurship, technology and investing.
So, sir, you have a thesis around businesses and business models which are, fundamentals, which are things like, which are very complex technologies above which every other thing is built and where maximum value capturing happens. And you give example of the airlines versus the airplane makers. Can you double click on that? Can you tell us what does it take? What type of businesses, how these types of businesses are different from each other? And what does it take to build a grassroots fundamental business where, maximum value capturing happens?
So first of all, the fact that there is a global kind of a chain, cotton will become yarn, yarn will become cloth, cloth will become, the kurta or shirt that we are wearing is not new, right? That's always been the case. We sometimes don't appreciate that some of these chains are very global. So for example, if I remember right, in 1741, in a place called Crompton in England, they created a water mill to actually turn cotton into yarn. So this is even before the British had fully established themselves there. Now, of course, they had the technology to make the yarn, but they didn't have the cotton. They had to import cotton from various places. And eventually they had colonies where they could get cotton from, right? So in this journey that is there, all parts don't accumulate equal value. It is a complex kind of an equation as to which part will be the most money-making part. Sometimes it is the deepest end, as you said, right? In tech, very often it is the deepest end. But in this cotton example, the poor cotton farmer doesn't make a lot of money. If at all somebody makes most money, it is the person who makes the kurta, and sells it. Let's say Fab India, right? India so far is by and large in almost any area, whether it's drugs or drugs as in pharmaceutical drugs, whether it's in textiles, whether it's in cars, whether it's in IT or AI, or any area that we are talking about, mobile phones, we are so far in the low value add part of the value chain, which is a great way to start, because that's the way you get to be part of the value chain. And then you have to make a pivot and make a shift to be in the valuable part of the value chain. So that activity is got to happen in the next 15, 20 years. If India is able to do that well, then India will be a important country. If India is not able to do that well and we remain in the shallow value addition part, then India will be a big country, but not an important country. I usually try and bring that out to people. Now, to do that is very hard because what it takes to be in the shallow part of the value chain, is a set of things. And almost a different set of things are needed to be in the deep part of the value chain. So that needs things like R&D, it needs many things, right? We'll talk about it as we go along. So we have to therefore build this new ecosystem that will allow us to be in the deep part of the value chain. And airlines and aircraft is an example of that. All the airlines of the world put together make less money than what Boeing and Airbus make because the aircraft is the valuable part of the value chain. Running an airline is a shallow part of the value chain. Not that we shouldn't do it. Of course, we have to do it, right? And if we need people to fly from one place to another, they might as well fly on our airlines, isn't it? But why shouldn't they fly on our planes as well? So this is what we have to think about as well.
So you mentioned that you have dedicated your life to create India a product nation. Two questions, sir. What is a product nation? And why do we need to make India a product nation?
It's a very good point. So let's tackle the why first. Sometimes that is helpful. So because what happens in many of these things is that every country will have an airline, right? Some countries will have multiple airlines. Every country will have a mobile operator. Many countries will have multiple mobile operators. Every country will have many hospitals. Many countries will have many IT services players. India has them. But very often, behind all of them, their suppliers are a handful of people. So all the people who have all the mobile operators in the world, they essentially buy from what are called as hens. Hens are Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, and Samsung. So now if there are 4 companies supplying to 200, 300
Operators.
Mobile operators, who do you think has power in this? Those 4.
Right.
But why only 4? Why not 40? Why not 400? Because at some level, when you get to these products, you have a winner-take-all mentality. So it is very unlikely that you will have an engineering college in India, which accounts for 80% of the students studying that branch of engineering, right? But it is very possible that 80% of the students studying engineering are reading one textbook. Is it not? Yes. So really, the goal is to therefore focus on that part where the winner takes all, because that's how you get very high value addition and value capture there. So the Indian story is really the story that is playing out in sports today. And that story is, of course, I can play recreational cricket, I can play recreational badminton, I can be a recreational marathon runner. But what does it take for an Indian to be a competitive cricketer, competitive marathon runner? That requires full devotion. So even if supposing, you guys are young, maybe you are a marathon runner. Let's assume you are. You are a recreational marathon runner. You say, I run because I enjoy it. Keeps me healthy. I'm very happy about it. And that type of recreational running is taking place in larger and larger numbers in India. So if you go to the Mumbai Marathon, the Bangalore Marathon, the number of people running that marathon is growing very rapidly. But part of that marathon is also the competitive marathon. Do you know who wins all those competitive parts of that marathon?
No.
It's Kenyans. Right? So they dominate the competitive marathon. Similarly in sports, it's easy to be a player of any game. We've often sent very large Olympic contingents. But for the size of our contingent, the number of medals that we get
very low
is the poorest tally that is there. So this is not to criticize that we don't play those games. We should play those games. But we must also have an aspect of the country which knows how to win at those games. And to win in those games requires a different mindset. It very often requires full dedication. If you're a recreational marathon runner, you don't need to practice a lot. But if you want to be a competitive marathon runner, how much do you think you will have to practice every day?
More than 10 hours, I believe.
More than 10 hours a day. Do you think you can do anything at all? No. You have to be
Focused, laser sharp.
laser sharp, unidimensional about it, right? So many years ago, Vivekananda then gave that quote. And I find that fascinating, right? Because Vivekananda said that sometimes if you really want to do something well, devote your life to one idea. So I, of course, have been passionate about products all my career. But sometime in 2009, I felt that, look, I was 45, I could go down this path of continuing with my career that I was on. And I was doing well, and that could have been a happy thing to do. I had been an entrepreneur by then, with my company at that time was now part of Cisco, so I could do that. That could have been interesting. But something inside tugged at me and said, look, what if instead, it was just not me, there were many others. Some of us felt, what if we devote our remaining time to helping India become a product nation, right? Because it's very hard to be a product nation. Because in any area, how many countries are good at AI today?
Maybe China and US.
Exactly. So if India has to be the third, it has to compete with whom? France is going to try that. Even UAE has a great model called Falcon there. You can be sure that I can name just now, you can name 10 countries which will try that.
Israel.
So Israel. So if you have to be amongst the top 3 or 4, it'll be effortful. It'll not come easy. And therefore, we as a country have to make that effort to be there. Because if we are there, it'll amount to something. If you are not there, then we'll just be a consumer of other people's AI. And that may well lead to digital colonization, something that we have fought very hard to avoid as we go forward. So therefore, we need people in India to focus on this mission, just the way we've been doing that in sports. And sports is a result of a small set of people making that push, and then that small set of people became a larger set of people. And now it's what's called as Halo India movement, right? And that is now delivering. Every year we are doing better than before. But that's been 20 years in the making, right? So that's the backstory.
So you're saying you have to be at the deepest end of the technology where maximum value creation happens in order to generate wealth and in order to uplift the country. And to do that, you have to make the country a product nation. Now, two things, sir. If India wants to become a product nation, what are the challenges that the country has to overcome? And second thing, you spoke about the mindset. What's the mindset of a product building person, or what's the mindset which will lead us to a product nation?
See, India is a big country, right? And we have all kinds of problems to solve. So for example, jobs is a very big problem, right? And so you could say, hey, okay, jobs is needed, wealth is needed, but between the two, jobs is more important. And I would actually agree with that formulation. So one of the sectors that creates the largest number of jobs for us is textiles, the garment sector, right? So in the garment sector, what tends to happen is what we get is mostly job work, right? Other countries will, and now much of that job work, and China emerged as the number one player in job work. And what should have been happening today is that a lot of that job work should be coming to India. Is it not? Because people are not wanting to, there's a China plus one strategy that the buyers have. So they're looking for an alternate to China. So when you look at that alternate, you want to see how well is India doing. And then you realize that how to find that out, how to know how much work is India getting. And one way to do that is by studying who is buying more industrial sewing machines. Because if you're buying more industrial sewing machines, then you're getting more job work, obviously. So by that, we can see Vietnam is doing better than Bangladesh. Bangladesh is doing better than us. We are doing marginally better than Sri Lanka. And you can say, can we fix this problem? Can we create an environment so that more jobs are created here? The challenge, though, is that a lot of this job work is tied to the underlying sewing machine itself, or is tied to design of the clothes, right? So what is happening, I ask this trick question to people and say, what is happening to our garment exports, is it growing? Let me ask you the question. I'll give you three choices. Is it growing by 26% a year? Is it flat, or is shrunk by 26% a year?
I believe it's flat.
It's shrunk by 26% a year.
And why it's happening? Because of the...
Because look, resilience in the job market, in the job work market, depends on either if you were designing the same clothes that we are manufacturing in another part of the city, since the designers are not going to go anywhere, there is stickiness of those jobs. They say keep the jobs close to the designers, right? Or the jobs will go to people who are able to embrace the new type of sewing machines, because those new sewing machines will allow newer
Better
people
efficiency.
better efficiency and better productivity. So if you neither own the design part of the value chain, nor own the machine part of the industrial sewing machine part of the value chain, then your ability to keep those jobs is very, very low.
Right.
Does that make sense? So therefore, even to keep jobs that we have, it becomes very essential for resilience of that job market. It becomes essential for us to be in the other parts of the value chain. Now, your question was to be a designer of, let's say, the t-shirt that you're wearing versus a manufacturer of the t-shirt. It requires completely different skill sets. One is about following instructions. One is about creating a design. Those two things are very, very different. In some cases, you're a rule follower. In some cases, you have to be a rule maker. In some cases, you're a fashion follower. In some cases, you have to be a fashion maker. Same is the case with the machine side. So it requires a different type of a person. It is just like saying that, look, although we have many ball games, just because you play hockey or cricket well doesn't mean you'll play golf well. In fact, just because you play golf well doesn't mean you'll play another ball game well, right? So these are actually different games that need different players, different mindsets, different ecosystems to develop them as we go forward.
You mentioned about hens. Let's say if some young person wants to, destroy this monopoly, or whatever you call the competitive play of these four companies, and want to create a different kind of mobile equipment manufacturer apart from hens. Can you break this down? Can you break this problem statement with first principles thinking? How should a 22-year person in India, sitting in India, can become the next player like a hens?
So first and foremost, the first insight that is important here is that person needs a ecosystem to thrive, because the ecosystem will give that person tacit knowledge, will give that person usually what is called as pre-commercial R&D, right? Regulation will play a very big role, because if your regulatory environment is not favorable, ab jo marzi, whatever you try and do, it'll be stymied by poor regulation. So that will be a factor. You must have an ability to find customers easily, which is usually your home market. It's easier to find home market customers rather than to find a customer, let's say, far away in another part of the world. Is it not? So therefore, there are certain prerequisites that need to be there for that person to thrive. So the thinking is that ultimately, a successful entrepreneur also requires a vibrant ecosystem. In fact, the big learning that has come is that a winning entrepreneur who will make it to hens, for example, in that list, and I'll just talk about that in a minute, will need an ecosystem that is there. It is the womb that produces the baby. If the womb produces only one type of baby, which is a services company, then the womb that will produce a new type of baby is actually a different kind of a womb itself. Right. So you have to start work on womb. So wherever this success has happened, so in hens alone, for example, Huawei, China was not a big player in telecom 30 years ago, right? Hence, Ericsson, Sweden and Nokia, Scandinavia was not a big player in telecom 30 years ago. And then Samsung, Korea, was not a big player. Who were the big players? The big players were people a company I worked for, AT&T, Lucent, Bell Labs, because Graham Bell was involved in that company at one time. It was companies in Canada, Nortel, right? It was players like that that were there. So how is it that all these four that you're talking about are actually from new places? Because in all of these cases, there is clear evidence that before the player actually came onto the scene, there were people thinking and building ecosystem well before that happened.
Give us an example. What kind of ecosystem you're talking about?
So, for example, right, if you go back in time, let's take an example. I like to say that India today is seeing lots of visitors come to talk about India Stack, right? India Stack is very popular. We must have hosted at least 50 countries in India over the last some years.
Who want to replicate the India
Stack. A similar phenomena was taking place in early 80s. In Scandinavia, what was happening was that they had very sparse population. So to get connectivity, they were experimenting with mobile phones. So then they started seeing success of GSM there. And then in the mid-80s, early to mid-80s, many people kind of went to see how that system is working there, right? And literally by end of 80s, more than 50 countries have said, hum bhi aisa copy karenge. Although they knew, in fact, India was one of those countries because India got mobile phone in 1996, 97. But it had decided that it will have a mobile phone system in early 90s. And when I don't know who from India went there, but whoever went there would have instantly said, I can see that they have sparse population. We have very dense population, but this system will still be good for us. So now the reason this spread everywhere is that Scandinavian GSM system, they made it a standard and gave it away to everybody for free. And as countries decided to follow that standard, then they said, who should we turn to implement this for us? And guess who were those companies? Ericsson and Nokia. Right? So this whole ecosystem building, first for their own use, then for the global use, was not done by Ericsson and Nokia, was done by other people who were ecosystem builders, and their work set the stage for Nokia and Ericsson to thrive. Now, the most exciting story, of course, is not this. There was a competing system that came. You must have heard of it, called CDMA.
Yes.
Right? Now, CDMA came, originally the air interface came from work in the US military. Then Qualcomm, a company, decided to take it everywhere. They wanted to make a case saying that CDMA is better air interface than GSM.
Right.
But nobody would believe it. Now, so they were desperate to say, we need a place to implement it so that we can demonstrate it to people that this is actually better. Right? So guess what? They're going around looking for people to demonstrate. At that time, Korea, as a country, said that, look, we'll give you a chance to demonstrate this in Korea. I know the whole world is going GSM. But if you demonstrate and it works, you have to help our companies become the market leaders in supplying equipment. That is how Samsung is in hands today. Take one step further. Rural connectivity was very important. There was in India C-DOT that had been set up to allow for that to happen. A lot of work on C-DOT and that rural connectivity happened in Chennai. Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala had a very important role to play in IIT Madras, right? And all that happened. But they were setting out to build a company. China decided to do this 31 months after C-DOT. Huawei is born after C-DOT. And Huawei is been very successful because China took an approach of saying, I'll build an ecosystem. I'm not going to bet on a winner. I'm going to bet on making sure that there are many players. The market will decide the winner. By the way, they're doing that with EV cars today, right? Can you guess how many EV car companies are there in China?
Many, BYD.
BYD is the winner.
Yeah.
But how many car companies are there? 300 EV car companies. Now BYD is now a winner, and has looked like a winner for the last 10 years. But China didn't go out to create BYD. It went out to create an ecosystem of many players and said, look, I don't know which one of them will be winner, but I have to create a good ecosystem so that everybody can be the best version of themselves and hopefully a winner will emerge.
And how did China create this ecosystem for the specific
This
example?
concept is not new. This concept we intuitively understand. So take Prakash Padukone. Prakash Padukone said, I want to put Indian badminton on the map. He didn't have the money to go and open badminton courts everywhere, right? So he says, I'll work with a pool of players that are already there. I'll help them be the best version of themselves. And by giving them the ecosystem that they needed, did that make a difference in badminton? Of course, it made a big difference in badminton.
Right.
So much so that Geet Sethi, who had himself on his own gone on to be successful, then teamed up with Prakash Padukone, and that both of them created a, I don't know whether you and your team have heard of it, something called the Olympic Gold Quest. And they said, can we create more Olympic gold winners? They were not blessed by the government. They set out on their own. They said, we know if we create a small ecosystem for different people, for athletics and for this, we know people will thrive. Because people will then, we don't know who the winners will be. Because we can't build a big ecosystem that we give a chance to everybody. We'll be a little picky about the athletes that we pick up. But we don't know who amongst them will be a winner. There'll be a portfolio approach. Some of them will emerge as a winner as we go forward. And indeed that happened. Then that formula of ecosystem building is what the government picked it up and calls it Hello India. And of course, government is able to do it at scale. So really the goal here, the first thing that we need is to start building the ecosystem. So and this has happened. Sometimes it happens organically and sometimes it needs to happen inorganically. So for example, we are here in Bangalore. Back in time, there was an ecosystem that got built. There were many, many IT services companies that came up. There was Birlasoft, there was TCS, there was Mastek, there was L&T doing Infosys, there was Wipro. There are many, many companies. There are literally 50, 60, 100 companies. But people didn't know who the winner is going to be. In fact, when the IPO happened of Mastek, Mastek's IPO was oversubscribed. And a few months later, Infosys IPO happened and that was undersubscribed. So at that time, the belief of the market was Mastek will be a winner, Infosys may not be such a winner. How wrong they were. True. Right? Infosys market cap, Infosys is one of the most valuable companies in the country. Right? So the question is that you don't pick the winner. You create a winning ecosystem. The market picks the winners. I cannot emphasize this enough. Why do I emphasize this? Because strangely, China as a communist country picked this up very quickly. Right? And who originally came up with this this method is in the US. MIT Dean of Engineering, his name is Vannevar Bush. But the many countries in the world got this system. In India, we were focused on producing the winner. So what did we say? हमें semiconductor करना है, semiconductor plant Mohali में लगा दो. Right? We should be big in electronics. ECIL will be our winner in electronics. Right? We must be big in advanced computing. CDAC will be our winner in. We must be winner in telecom. CDOT will be our winner in telecom. We want to be big in power equipment. BHEL will be our winner. We've done this again and again and again. The only time that it has worked is with a company that has done well in India, and that is Maruti. We said, we don't have a small car company, let Maruti be a small car company. Right. Luckily, it was never a public sector company in that respect. and it had to compete, and that competition has made it better. It is a good car company, but frankly, it's not gone as far as it should have, because it's not yet inventing the cars, right? It's basically taking the Japanese cars and producing them here. So this model that we have been wedded to for the last 50, 70 years is not a model that works to create winners. So sometimes the starting point is, what should we unlearn? We should unlearn this idea of creating winners. We should learn the idea of creating a winning ecosystem.
What are some parts of creating a winning ecosystem? And tell us through an analogy of how you came, with the idea of UPI.
So if you are creating a ecosystem, let's take AI as an example. AI, we know, needs data, needs compute,
Right.
needs, you can say, talent, and needs reinforcement learning. So it needs local users. So a good ecosystem will be which has all these four things. And compute often means capital, right? So you can say all these five things. You also need good regulation, because that can kill it. So let's add regulation to the mix. So you can say all these six things. Let us say we create this. And in all the six, we are middling players compared to other countries. Do you think that will create a winning AI company?
No.
No. Because it will be a ecosystem. It will not be a winning ecosystem. For it to be a winning ecosystem, you need, out of these things that we talked about, six things, at least in some things,
You have to be the top.
you have to be better than anybody else. So can we take today in India, the constraint is being able to get proprietary data sets. For legal reasons, it is not easy to do that in India. Can we turn that constraint into a asset? If we can, then there's a chance we are a winning ecosystem, because at least in one of the dimensions,
We are above.
we are above. Can we have to do regulation? Everybody has to do regulation. Can we think deeply about regulation and make it something which is not a ho-hum regulation, but is really progressive regulation, world-class regulation that creates safe AI, but also gives room for innovation for world-class AI? Can we do that? Of course, everybody is starting at the same point. We can. If we can do that, then out of the six, we've come somewhere. And if we then take the remaining items and create them and say, even if they're not the best, they're neutral, they're not negative, will we have a better chance of being a winning ecosystem to create a winning player? Of course. Now the question is, who thinks about this?
Government?
But who is government? Who's usually the government? It's either the minister, or it'll be a secretary, right? It'll be a policy maker, right? How long will the minister be there?
5 years max.
Max, if at all, right? Because portfolios change, everything changes. How long will the policy maker be there?
Maximum 10 years, let's say.
Very unlikely, because you retire at the senior level in 3-4 years,
Right.
or you get to a new position. How long does ecosystem building take?
At least 10-20 years. At least a decade.
At least 10-15 years. So you need to create institutions that will be sitting with this idea and say, this is our game plan of the ecosystem. The policy maker will come and go. The minister may come and go. The government may come and go. The party in the government may come and go. But we will stick to this for the next 10-15 years. So in no democracy does this happen inside the government. Because by definition, in no democracy does it last that long. The government in power has that stability. So what do? They say, can the universities do this? That's why one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is because I believe we need to reinvent our engineering universities. And I'm hoping that Plaksha, the new ones that are coming up, can be focused on being that Sutradhar for the 15 years. Driverless cars. You know who is that person who owns this ecosystem building? Since 2004, Carnegie Mellon University.
Why do you say so?
Because Carnegie universities take a long view of things. They have professors who are there for some time. They have students who can participate in making it happen. and they are able to bring everybody together. So universities play a very important role. Second, much of, let's say, nuclear fission or nuclear fusion is again a 15-year journey. Small nuclear reactors is also a 10-15-year journey. Who owns the ecosystem building of that? Is usually the research labs in the US. Because the research labs own this. For example, NASA is working on, NASA could have well said, all rockets that go to space, US rockets will be NASA rockets. That's not what it's saying. It says space shuttle was the last one that we made. Now we want to create a private industry of that. So they are actually shepherding, building the ecosystem that allows people to have it, so that they can give them launch pads, they give them funding, they give them, how to deal with regulation, how to deal with safety. They are ecosystem enablers for Lockheed, for Boeing, for SpaceX. Who's turned out to be a surprising winner in all of this? SpaceX. But if you go back just 7-8 years, people didn't think they would be the winner. But they were not they are not picking the winner. In fact, the criticism is they're still not picking SpaceX as a winner, although it's clear SpaceX is a winner, right? So, but that ecosystem building can happen, therefore, in these labs that we are talking about. In India, that labs is not happening because our CSIR labs and our research labs are not, they are not doing a great job, frankly.
What's the problem? कहाँ पर problem आती है?
See, because in all of this, what happens is that people work very hard to get what is called as tenureship.
Right.
When you get tenureship, when the janitor has a tenureship right from day one, to kya farab? To, nobody can kick us out, so why worry about this at all? That's how university professors do their best work in the quest for tenureship. And then they get hooked onto it, and then of course some of them go further, some of them just start chilling out after that. So we haven't created the right structures for that. Our labs are not doing it. The third place where it could happen is think tanks. That's where iSPIRT comes in. So we said, let's create the new type of think tank that we need that will allow for this kind of ecosystem building to happen.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So first is we need the right builders of the ecosystem. And in our problem is, it's not the government policymaker, the minister, which says, I shall be that ecosystem builder. It is we have been so conditioned to have this concept of a my-baap state that we think government should be the ecosystem builder, and that's not realistic at all. Even if it tries, it cannot be, because it is not got that, it doesn't have two things that are needed. One, it doesn't have the long horizon of thinking that is needed, for this to happen. So you need an institutional structure. The second thing that you need, ecosystem building itself has to involve risk taking.
And why can't government take risk?
Because the government policymaker who goes and works for the government is person who is risk averse. Right. If they're risk taking, they would not be working for the government. They'll be working mostly in the private sector or other places, right? So you have to require is that, because the government wants stability, right? The government wants society to be stable. So the role of the policymaker, the role of the bureaucrat is to provide stability in society. That is what their role is.
Right. Not to disrupt.
Not to disrupt. They're not meant to be the disruptors. Heavens forbid, if they start being the disruptors, what might happen? So they're meant to be the stability providers. Now, the day you start expecting them to be disruptors as well, how is it? It's very difficult to combine. You can be one or the other. It's very difficult to be both. Now, there are pockets since the government can be a champion of creating a university which plays that role. It can be a champion of a think tank that plays a role. It can be a champion of a lab, research lab that plays a role. But it cannot be that person itself. So this is why I want to first start off by what must be unlearned. This notion that we can create, India can be a swimming champion amongst the top 3 countries of the world. It looks bizarre, but it's possible. In fact, Karnataka as a state is the best state for swimming in the country, because luckily, because of few good people, 20-25 years ago, we started building an ecosystem. And that ecosystem then plays a role. So this is why Indians thrive. Indians have the capability. But when they go to an ecosystem that is supportive, they thrive there. If we can give them the same ecosystem in India, don't you think they'll thrive here?
Of course, yes.
Of course they will. Talent is the same. They come from the same place. So what is missing here is the ecosystem. And to build the ecosystem, we have to take responsibility. We have to involve the government, but we cannot delegate it to the government. That is a distinction that we have to learn to make as we go forward.
You mentioned about Carnegie Mellon. You mentioned about how Gopichand sir created this ecosystem. Give us some more example of such ecosystems, successful ecosystems in India and abroad, iSPIRT being one, so that, we get some context to...
There's been very few, because what happened was, in sports, I gave you some examples. And the good part is that even where there has been an outstandingly successful sports person, for example, a shooter that is there,
Abhinav Bindra?
Abhinav, can we now use him to create an ecosystem around him? There's a very successful company back in time. We used to use it for international talking to people, Skype. Skype comes from which country?
Sweden?
It comes from even smaller country, Estonia. What is the population of Estonia?
Lakh
Is 3 million. I think something in that range, right? 2 million, 3 million, it's a very small country. There was this discussion taking place on we need a new protocol for multimedia calls. And the committee got created under ITU to create that protocol. And that protocol is called H.323. And that protocol was a committee-based protocol. So it tended to be bulky. And there were 3 people sitting in Bell Labs at that time. They looked at this protocol and they said, what is this? We can do better. So they decided to build a better protocol, a simpler version of that protocol. And that protocol, for a variety of reasons, they call it Session Initiation Protocol. Although the S was simple, was their mindset. They gave it to Internet Engineering Task Force, which was not into these, telecom protocols at all, where it got lots discussed and became an IETF standard. Now, one of those persons, Jonathan Rosenberg, is now looking for people and saying somebody should implement this protocol, because everybody wanted to implement the so-called official protocol, which was H.323, right? So this small team in a piddly little country, Estonia, said, we are interested. So he went and joined this little startup and became a late founder and a CTO of that company. That company went on to become Skype and the most successful telecom company there. Now, of course, what they did was they took the founders of Skype in Estonia and made an ecosystem around it. And now Estonia is a player in many things digital. Is it not? Right? So the point I'm making is that we have to learn to recognize the ecosystem builders and the people who leverage the ecosystem to become successful players. Now, this brings me to India Stack or to UPI. India Stack is an attempt to build an ecosystem.
What are some parts of creating a winning ecosystem? And tell us through an analogy of how you came, with the idea of UPI.
If you go back to mid-80s, no software was built on time or on budget or sometimes even with high quality. They said, out of the 3, pick one, right? You can't get 2 of the 3, let alone 3 of the 3. So what happened is, at that time, IBM was a very successful company. And IBM had made a big bet on software. And they had created a software division. And that person who headed that software division was a very respected person. His name is Watts Humphrey. So when he retired from IBM, he said, I want to devote my life to fix this here. We can build a bridge on time, on budget, and high quality, but we can't build software. So I got to figure this out. And that time, Carnegie Mellon went to him and said, yes, let's do it together. So they created the Software Engineering Institute in Carnegie Mellon University. For 2 years, he went everywhere to learn how to do it. And he came up with a then bizarre idea. It's not so bizarre now because we got used to it. But the bizarre idea was that if you want to build good software, all this process compliance, ISO certification is all garbage. Although everybody that was doing is ISO certified. All that is nonsense. That's not what's important. Software requires many types of skills. And if an organization has to develop all the skills that it needs, then it has to do it in a systematic fashion. It must get this skill before this competency before this competency. It must learn to walk before, before it runs, and learn to crawl before it walks, and so on and so forth. So he laid them out in stages and said, look, if you acquire these competencies in these stages, and if all of these are there, then it's almost a guarantee you'll make good software, right? The idea took root. And everybody said, this is a great idea. We should apply it. And so they started applying it. And they applied it, and it didn't work as well as expected. So a conversation started. Why is it not working? They said it's not working because retooling the mind is very difficult, right? Especially people have been successful in software, telling them there's a different way of thinking about it. They pay lip service to it, but they don't change their mind.
Thinking way,
Their thinking way. So an idea took root, was saying that let's create clean sheet centers. Let's create a new development center, which right from day one will be based on the SCI's, Software Engineering Institute, CMM model. I used to work for AT&T at that time, a very rich company at that time. And I remember vividly John Borum, my boss's boss, he also had this responsibility, and people came and they said, we want to do this. It was a rich company. They said, yes, sir, this is a great idea. Go and do it in North Carolina, in Research Triangle Park. So that was internally called the Silver Bullet Project. In Cary, North Carolina, it came up. At that time, a piddly startup, but a very well-regarded startup, a young startup, was Motorola. Motorola was known for its quality, but it was a young, scrappy startup. It didn't have the money. It was based out of Chicago. So a person there, his name is George Smith. He went also and said, we should do the same. Hamara to calling card is quality. We should do this. And they laughed at him. They said, do you think we are AT&T, rich like AT&T? We don't have all this.
Right. We are poor startup guys.
We are poor startup guys. We don't know. But by the way, only 2-3 weeks ago, we decided to open a center in this small city called Bangalore. If you want to go there and try it out, aap kar lo. He had never been to India before. He agreed to take on that role, and he moved to Also Road, where Motorola Electronics India Limited is. The world's first SCI Level 5 center was Motorola or Also Road, right? To his credit, the other thing that they asked for as part of this, that you should give away your knowledge. So everybody who was doing SCI CMM was supposed to participate in a software process improvement network. There was nobody else doing it. So he created the software process improvement network. In 93-94, it had become the world's largest software process improvement network.
In India, in Bangalore.
In Bangalore. Because back in time, he was passionate about it. He is the ecosystem builder here. He could have kept it all for Motorola. He didn't. He said, let everybody benefit from this. Literally stone's throw. Some of your listeners who are from Bangalore will know, from Alsu Road to 88 MG Road, which is where Wipro was headquartered, was a person there. His name is Dr. Sridhar Mitta. Dr. Sridhar, out of respect, deep respect. Because he said, I think this is crazily important for us. Because we currently are selling services as low-cost IT services. Low cost implies low quality. If we can become early adopters of the CMM, SCI CMM, then we can make a claim we are high quality, low cost, but high quality. Right? So he went to his boss's boss, Ashok Soota, and then Premji. Premji, to his credit, fully on board. To his credit, and this is the admirable part of Dr. Mitta. He said, we shouldn't do it alone. We should get everybody else to do this. So he convinced Mr. Premji. They went to Narayan Murthy. Narayan Murthy is on board. The two of them get convinced. Now say we have to get the big guy, which is TCS, FC Kohli. We have to convince him. They go to him. FC Kohli was saying, "Tum bacche ho, tumhe kya malum?" No, he wasn't convinced. So Harish Mehta, who is the founder of, one of the co-founders of NASSCOM, he said, no, have patience. I'll make something happen. He organized an offsite with families. And in that 3-day offsite,
They convinced Mr.
Mr. Kohli came on board. A few years later, they gave a 16-page ad in Fortune magazine. 8 companies paid for it, in which, and Fortune magazine used to be the business magazine of that era. People like youngsters like you can't imagine that before that internet, magazines were the way to, for people. Business magazines were very, very important, and Fortune was extraordinarily important. And to have a 16-page glossy supplement in that was a big deal, right? Where they made an argument that we are low cost, high quality. And many companies were doing that. So this ecosystem that allowed companies to position themselves as low cost, high quality was using something that was not even invented in India, was invented in Carnegie Mellon University. But India had become an early adopter, not even because of an Indian company, but because of Scrappy, because of Motorola. And in fact, at one time, I remember many of us in Bangalore even signed a petition saying that George Smith should at least get one of these Padma Awards, right? Because his contribution has been so significant. Unfortunately, nobody paid attention. He is a person who brought this current form of the industry to life by creating the spin network, by percolating this idea, by encouraging others to take it on. And then Dr. Sridhar Mitta to encourage other companies to take this on. And then, because it was an ecosystem play, yes, one company could do well, another company could do well, another company could do well. Then, when it came to SaaS, India is thriving in software as a service. It came to SaaS. This is where iSPIRT played a role. We said, if you have to do mid-market SaaS, we have to sell without a sales force. Because selling a sales force in the US is very expensive, in the West, very expensive. Our companies cannot afford it. Can we become good at desk marketing and selling? And so we put in the effort to become good at desk marketing and selling. And here there were playbook roundtables that were done. So here, the ecosystem contribution was a playbook, right? And that playbook took root. You can ask anybody in the world, which is the best place for desk marketing and selling. It is in India. And so India became in that ecosystem, it became very good at it. It like, at one time we were very good at spinning in cricket, right? Some countries are good in creating pace bowlers. So we have become good at desk marketing and selling. And then around that desk marketing and selling, everything else comes in. And that allows us to create a winning ecosystem. That allows us to create winning companies.
What was desk marketing?
Desk marketing is sitting here in Chennai, for example, can you sell to somebody there in the mid-market, in the States? And can you do this over email? Can you do this over by trial and error, by creating a good product and say you try it for some time and test it out for yourself, right? Not having to send a single salesperson there. And why could you do it? Because Amazon had created AWS. So in any case, the product would live on the cloud. So what Amazon had done was to create something that will live on the cloud. What India did was to find a way to sell a cloud software at scale. So the big company which does that, Zoho, today has more users than all the rest of the IT services companies put together. So then came this idea, how do we get our soft startups to solve this problem for Bharat? Bharat has now become all of India. But back then, 10 years ago, Bharat meant middle India, right? You know, if you divided India into India 1, India 2, India 3, it meant 100 million families, 100 million families, because India is roughly about 300 million families. The middle 100 million families, they have the possibility to participate. But at that time, being able to sign them up was very difficult, right? Being able to have them pay for something online was very difficult. For them to get personalized service. You know, personalization happens if I know who you are, and then I personalize. Was very difficult. None of this was created. So to create that is why India Stack Digital Public Infrastructure was created. And to make it tangible, we decided to create it for a street vendor called Rajni. So that became the intervention to create a Bharat ecosystem in India, a digital Bharat ecosystem in India. And if you go and talk to Nitin Kamath, you know, who you were meeting earlier, he would say Zerodha would not have the customer base that it has. But for this.
Same with Paytm.
Same with Paytm.
Everybody.
And of course, Jio did a big contribution. Without Jio, none of this would have come to life. So therefore, an ecosystem has not got created. Now, in this ecosystem, is it not likely that Indian startups will create more value in health, in education, in financial inclusion, in many, many areas for a middle Indian, right, whose annual household income is in the range of, let's say, 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs. If Indian companies can thrive in doing that, don't you think they'll be able to serve Africa as part of the process? They'll be able to serve every part of the world. So we will see Indian companies go global in the middle Indian segment, in the mid-market segment, right, in a way that we have not seen before. Now, of course, other countries say, I should have my own companies that are able to do this. And what is the answer to that? Build an ecosystem. How do you build an ecosystem? We will give you our India stack for free because India has a long tradition of helping other countries. We'll give it to you. Please use it. And so therefore, those 50 countries are coming and saying, are you sure you really want to give it to us? How do we implement it? What will it take for us to implement it? So therefore, now volunteers can't do this. iSPIRT volunteers don't have, we're not such a large number. So a center has been created in IIM Bangalore to allow for that to happen. It's called Center of Excellence for DPGs. There's a center that has come up in IIIT Bangalore. So one focuses more on tech, one focuses more on the business side.
Aspect.
But the idea is that countries should be able to create their own ecosystem. But in all these three areas, our lucky part was that there was no previous ecosystem that we had to replace. So there was nobody else lobbying against it, right? Now, supposing you want to do that in an area, let's say you want to do that in as simple area as drones. Drones, there are two parts of the drones industry. There's the drones services industry. There's the drones manufacturing industry, right? Now, if you're on the services side, what do you want? You want the cheapest drones. What do you want? You want the Chinese drones should be imported
To India.
Right. Because you want the cheapest drones to be available to you to do that.
Makes more business sense, huh?
What does the drone making industry want? That give us some protection for a few years, some partial protection, if not full protection. So people have difficulty buying from outside so that we can get started and we can make use of the Indian market. These two parts of the drone industry are in collision with each other. And therefore, we are not able to do ecosystem building well. Until we as a country begin to realize that if we are only a drone services industry, will not be an important country. If we can be what China did, they are the biggest garment job work exporter, but they use the fact that they're a job work exporter to also build the industrial sewing machines. Now 82% of our industrial sewing machines in India are coming from China. 12 years ago, they were coming from Japan and Germany. So they have displaced Japan and Germany because they had the wisdom to say, if we can do one part, why don't we do the more valuable part of the value chain also? Although it needs a different kind of a mindset. There, an ordinary Chinese, an ordinary Japanese, I would say today an ordinary American too, says, if something equally good is available from my own country, I'll buy that. An ordinary Indian is not yet thinking like that.
Why is the problem?
Because we don't have faith in our own country. The beauty is that people outside, you go to Africa, Africans have more faith in our software products than Indians have faith in our own software products.
What's the psychology? You are a student of philosophy and psychology. Why is it happening?
I think one of the reason is that, look, this is a report that is going to come out from World Bank in April of next year. And they point out that going till the middle income levels is easy. Crossing middle income
Trap is very hard.
very difficult.
Why?
One of the reasons they give is saying that the incumbents who already crossed it don't want one more member of the club. Right? So till you are growing till the middle income,
They have no issues.
they have no issues. Whether they buy from Vietnam or they buy from India, Bangladesh, they're everybody's friends.
Right.
They don't care. But if you are going to now do design that is being done in their country, or sewing machines that are being done in their country, and you're going to do, then they will resist your rise. And we as a country have been so naive and so needy for Western kind of approval that wherever there has been a resistance to our rise, we walked away. So the joke is, an IIT engineer will not go and join ISRO, not because of money alone, because ISRO's rise is a resisted rise. You remember at one time we didn't get the cryogenic engines. They had to figure out the cryogenics engines on their own. There have been cases of, you've seen movies come out where foreign intelligence agencies have killed our people, because they didn't want India to become the space power it has become. So if you grow up in an environment where your sense of social proof is because the West likes me, then why do something that West is not going to like? And there are cultural reasons that prevent us from doing that. And so then what has happened is that in almost every industry, so take the case of steel, right? Or take the case of glass. Specialty glass companies. You have the specialty glasses on our phones, Gorilla Glass. What company does it come from?
China?
Corning. It's a US company.
Okay.
But there are very few specialty glass makers. Again, a circle of 5. There are 4 or 5 companies in the world that make specialty glass. Their combined profits are more than the general glass makers of the world put together. Because the money obviously is in specialty glass. Similarly, the money is in specialty steel, not in regular steel, right? So what happens is, when our specialty steel industry wants an ecosystem to be built, and sometimes that is saying that give me some nuanced ring fencing, then who objects to that?
The other companies?
The users of specialty steel, they say, we want the cheapest specialty steel. If it's going to go up by 5%, that's going to be too bad for us. We don't want that here. So they stymie the effort of the specialty glass makers. So what has happened is, our low value ecosystem, low value addition ecosystem, whether it's in IT services or it's in airlines or in all of this, they have become biggest champions of foreign companies selling in India. So you cannot convince Airtel and Reliance to say support an Indian telecom company,
because there is no option.
Today, there is no option. So in other countries, those without any government interventions, they will seek out their local companies, because their mindset is that we must win every part of the value chain, especially the value addition part of the value chain. That mindset is not there in our country. And because that mindset is not there, we don't focus. And when we focus, when we run into problems, we back away from it very quickly. Why do we run into problems? Because this is hard to do, 10, 15 years. So in the beginning, there'll be some failures, right? Second, we run into problems because our own people will oppose it. So for example, I'll give you an example in a minute in software products. Then third is, foreign companies will lobby against it because they want to resist. If the lobbying doesn't work, then they'll get the governments to lobby, right? If that doesn't work, they'll send their intelligence agencies to slow you down. But we don't understand all that. So now take an example of this. India became the first country to not allow software patents, right? Software patents, the original idea of patents was that they are good for the innovator.
Safeguard their rights.
Safeguard their rights. But the implementation of that became that patents are now used, especially in the US system, only by the incumbent. वो बहुत सारे patents ले लेते हैं, and then they do what is called patent. They legally harass the young innovators with patent infringement and stuff like that. Now, this is a well understood problem. India, because it wants to develop a software product industry, very early on decided that we will not have software patents. We were the first country in the world to do that. Today, now copying us, New Zealand has done that, Australia has done that, China has done that, EU has announced that they want to do that, because all of these are victims of the patent troll system, which is broken in the US. And in the US, Google, Facebook, Tesla has said the system is broken, so we will not use it for offensive purposes. We'll be good citizens, we'll only use it for defensive purposes. So even in the US, everybody accepts that this is broken. They're not able to get themselves to solve the problem, but the problem is well acknowledged. Now, obviously, the companies that don't like this come and lobby. They have their own lobbyist here. Our policymakers are often not well educated. They change every 3 years, so they have an opportunity to skip this, they try with the new people every now and then. But who are their biggest allies? Our IT services companies.
Right?
Because our IT services companies are essentially relying on their products, SAP, IBM, Oracle, to sell. They twist their arm. They say, क्या करें? वो हमारे principal हैं, they are our principal partners. We have to go along with what they're suggesting. So not a single IT services company has broken the pack so far. How can India become successful if our own people cannot see the need to become a product nation? So we will remain a country of job work. Whether it's job work in IT, job work in garments, job work in any other area, in Uber drivers, the people on back of our job work who will become rich are not our workers. Because in the job work market, you never become rich. You just have sustenance engineering. For example, your people can Google and say, Thailand's per capita income has grown. You Google and say, Thailand auto exports. You will see for yourself. People are moving from saying, why do we have to be in a 10,000, 11,000 per capita economy? We are going to do auto job work. Let's go and do it in Vietnam. That's $4,000 per capita economy. So if you have not started doing design of cars there, and you are not doing any other complex stuff, which is machine tools, then this is going to move. There's no stickiness there at all.
Because they will move to a company where cheap labor is there.
That is called the middle income trap. Now, I ask you a question. Who has seen better per capita income growth in the last 25 years? Thailand or China?
Of course, China.
See, it's a trick question. It's actually Thailand. The remarkable thing about China is that despite a 20 times the population of Thailand, it has managed to grow almost at the same rate as Thailand.
What was the reason behind this?
Because Thailand is a East Asian tiger story. It set up systems. It became the job work capital in many areas. It's done very well. China also became the job work capital area. It's done very well. Now, the difference is both of them have hit a middle income trap. What is the difference between the two countries? The difference between the two countries is China is on its own saying, I don't want to do garment job work. Please, you take my garment job work. Just buy my machines. I will make more money from your job work, from my machine, than you will make from your own job work. This is what they say. They're saying, don't worry about low-cost assembly of the phones in your country, in my country. I don't need that because I have built an ecosystem. I can sell you my own phone itself. 50% of the smartphones sold in India are Chinese. They're saying, I don't want auto job work to be done because I'm going to sell you the damn car itself. Right? Are you with me? I could go on and on, right? They said, we don't want to give you APIs.
Active pharmaceutical ingredients.
We'll give you the whole therapeutics. They're the market leaders in genomic therapeutics in the world.
And now India is becoming the plus one and they are taking all their work. So it's like a trap that,
So India is still trying to get to where they are in the next 15 years. That's a good thing. But the point I'm saying is, can Thailand now suddenly say, I'm not going to manufacture a car, I'm not going to do job work, I'm going to now be a car designer and manufacturer itself. Even if they decide to do it, how long will it take for them to do it?
At least 1-2 decades.
1 or 2 decades. So if they start now, will it work for them? No. Because by that time, it would be too late. China had the wisdom to anticipate this will happen to them. And therefore, they started 20 years ago, 15 years ago. and they're paying the dividend of that now. If we hope to hit a middle income trap 10, 15 years from now, don't you think we must start now?
We should have started maybe
Shouldn't that be the organizing principle of our ecosystem, of our economics? But it is not, because हमारे अंदर ही अभी फूट है. Because this other part of the services, job work ecosystem has not seeded ground, and our elites, our intellectuals have not accepted this idea that while this is important, this is not going to go away. For our long-term health,
you have to invest.
we have to also start a new way of ecosystem building. So today, this ecosystem building is happening in the margins. It is happening on the sidelines. It's happening in spite of the support of the public at large. It is not happening because of that. Now, luckily for us, we've had some successes. We had the SaaS success. Now we've had the India Stack success. Can we turn this into an AI success? I think we can. Can we turn this into an EV success? I think we can. Can we turn this into a drone success? I think we can. Can we even aspire to have a quantum success? I think we can. But for all of this, we need ecosystem building. And then if we do that ecosystem building with rigor, with patience, and with gumption, then you will see the results of this as you perform.
So are there any ecosystem builders in these areas that you mentioned which you believe, which you are personally betting on in the field of AI, in the field of, quantum, in the field of whatever you mentioned?
There are about 8 areas, I would say, that are iSPIRT affiliated, but not iSPIRT run, that are important. So we are doing that as a country, we are doing that in orphan diseases. Because if we go after diabetes and all, the big pharma is too powerful. And their friends in India are also very powerful. So big pharma and their friends will prevent us from being able to do that. But if you do an orphan disease, then you can do that. And why is it important to try and do that? Because all this happens when something changes. And therefore, in the disease model, something has changed in a big way. Today, there is not an attempt to deal with cancer by killing something, which is chemotherapy, but is by also changing the metabolism of the patient. And that's called cell therapy, right? That change, this new disease model, saying change the metabolism, originally comes from Ayurveda. It's an Indian model. To understand the metabolism, you need computational biology. You need synthetic biology. All those is within grasp. So what if we apply all this for orphan diseases that the big pharma doesn't want to care about? So therefore, we can become big players in that area as we go forward. In fact, that's why we have a COVID vaccine. We are in the circle of 5 for COVID vaccine. Right? And because COVID vaccine is because Bharat Biotech, which made the Indian COVID vaccine, originally had done it for rotavirus. Rotavirus is an orphan disease. He was passionate, an AIIMS doctor, passionate to make that happen. He went to all the Western companies and said, please vaccine bana do. They said, it's not commercially attractive to us. That is how BIRAC was created. And then you ended up having Bharat Biotech and other companies that have come up. So can we do orphan diseases and become in the circle of 5 for that? Can we do that for defense equipment? Can we do that for telecom? In fact, for the last 3 months, I am having a bet with people. This is the first time I'm revealing this bet in a podcast. When I'm in the US, I say, look, hens is going to drop off because people don't want to buy Chinese. Who's going to take its place?
Tejas?
Right? They don't say Tejas. They will say Cisco. They'll say Mavenir. If you do that in Europe, then they will say Alcatel. Even if you say that in India, you heard my podcast, so therefore you know.
Yes.
Most people won't know that they should actually, there will be possibly an Indian company. So I now do a bet. I say, I think it will be Tejas. Let's have a lunch bet on this. They happily do the lunch bet with me because they think it's such an outlandish idea. But it is not an outlandish idea. Why is it not an outlandish idea? Because we were able to take just BSNL, not even Airtel, not even Jio, just BSNL, and said it will buy Indian. It didn't say it will buy Indian from Tejas. It say it will buy just Indian. And there are 5 companies that it evaluated from whom to buy. That included Reliance, which had acquired a company called Raxis. It included Tech Mahindra. It included Sterlite, TCS, and of course, the consortium around Tejas. And Tejas won that.
So you mentioned about the ecosystem building and everything. So if a young person knows this, tell us how should we apply the first principles thinking to figure out the gaps in the market where we can actually attack?
Look for players where ecosystem building is already happening. Let's say you had many games. You are a very talented person in sports and you can play any game. Now you've got to pick a game where you think you can reach and win an Olympic medal. Then obviously pick a game where you can find a good coach. You will get opportunities for global participation in global competitions, right? And you'll have an ability to spend a lot of time practicing because facilities are available. If you can just optimize for these 3, then if you chose a game where these 3 are available versus they are not available, don't you think your odds of success will be a lot higher?
Very high.
So the first is since you're a player, focus on finding a place where you can find good ecosystem support.
Okay.
If you can do that, that will make a world of difference. If that means relocating to Chennai for SaaS, do that. If that means relocating to Bangalore for AI, do that, right? If it means being in Delhi for consumer stuff, do that, right? So that forming the way to think of it is that, look, your success depends on your ability to ride a warm air current, right? If somebody is trying to create a warm air current and they're doing a half good job, take advantage of it. Forget creating the current. Just be in the midst of taking advantage of that current. Because it is that current plus why the birds rise so high, because they don't flap. They use the warm air currents. If they're to migrate, they use migratory currents to make that happen. So a smart entrepreneur, a smart person will find the warm air current to you, right? And that usually is hidden. It's not so visible.
How do you find those hard?
That is the very important part of this. So I've told the story many places. That is where our own people are missing, because our own people think that what is on social media is actually the warm air current. In fact, the trick is to find things that are not yet on social media.
How do you find that? Where do you find that?
You find that by really doing your research, listening to podcasts, doing organized research in an area, looking for people. For example, let's say you want to build developer tools for AI. If you apply yourself to this, you can easily find all the thought leaders on developer tools of AI in 10, 15 days of work online. Is that possible? Right? Then you can read all their papers that have been written. You can see or review the tools even if they are not available for free. If you write to somebody and say, I'm a student, or I don't have money, can I do a trial version of this? Usually somebody will send that to you. So that is where it has to live. We are not going up. What has become, we are all Bollywood fans. We are not Veda thinkers. Nobody, Gita bhi bahut kam log, people are not going from the bhajan level to the Gita level, let alone the Veda level. It is possible to do that. But if you don't do that, you will never be an early mover. You will always be a late mover because you waited for something to reach the bhajan level.
And you will miss the train.
And now you are one of many. You missed the train. That early effect that could have come your way will not come your way. That's why when you were asking me a question, what are you working on next? We keep it very, very low-key. We are in IKP Eden. We keep this place low-key. Because almost every medical device player has walked through this. And I would say 9 out of 10 have walked this. If we advertise this a lot more, we would get 90 more applications. But they'll be mostly garbage. The signal to noise ratio will go down. Right now, the person that you get is the guy who has done the homework, talked to people, figured out and said, okay, this is the place I must get to. Let me go and check it out. So this ability to be a contrarian, to be a person who is going to pick things before they become popular, is the skill that we need to cultivate most in ourselves. Because of social media, everybody has become a conformist. Everybody wants to follow a fashion. Everybody wants to fit in. It is the people who are not going to fit in today. They are doing something that's unfashionable today, but will become fashionable 5 years later. Well, they are the ones who will be successful. But if you don't have any muscle left in your body to be unfashionable, तो आप क्या करेंगे? तो सिर्फ फैशन वाला काम करेंगे. उसमें कुछ मजा नहीं है.
Then tell us about how to become a contrarian, sir.
See, your first podcast was with an investor.
Right.
With an investor, you have to be a contrarian. Because if you follow something that everybody is investing in, will you make a lot of money?
No.
You make a lot of money if you do something that others are not yet investing in,
Right.
but will go mainstream in the future. You have to be both contrarian and right. Just being contrarian for the sake of contrarian doesn't give you anything. So to be contrarian needs to develop your muscles. I felt my muscles got developed because till today I have not watched the movie Sholay, which was the most popular movie of my school era. Right? I joke with people because, it was easy to be contrarian, but if there was social media at that time,
You would have probably
I
swayed
would
away.
have also gone ahead and swayed and got there. So being a contrarian is important, but being right is even more important. Being right means you must think deeply. You must think for yourself. You must to listen to many people's opinion, then fashion your own, right? Because you're not renting an opinion. You are arriving at your own opinion.
Right.
And that requires deep thinking. That deep thinking is required. So this is why our best example of why we keep our things low-key is that our wave one partners are people who join us when everything is low-key. Of course, in the process, we miss some out. And in the process, we even go to some of them and say, you should be part of wave one for this. And some of them say no, because they say it's not yet successful. You say, by wave one, hai. But they said, okay, never mind. But some are smart enough to be thankful that we've come to them, and some evaluate and say, we won't do it. So the point I'm saying is that opportunities are still there in plenty. But what is not there is the mindset of the people. People are wanting to just chase what is fashionable today. And that is not the answer to almost any success that you're looking for in your life.
So people who are watching, throw some lights on some warm, air currents, which you think are going to, ride, on which, these young folks, if they ride on that, and if they apply some muscle power to it, they're going to go places.
Which is the less paying job that you will pick that would be right for you? The most paying job for you would be a consulting job, would be an investment banking job. But that's not right for you. For somebody who really has some engineering kind of muscles in their body, then that's not the right job for you. Then the question is, what do you then optimize for? Then can you optimize that for something else? Can you optimize that for learning? Can you optimize that for going deep, spending 5-7 years, going deep and becoming one of the well-regarded people in that area? So can you develop yourself in that expertise form? So your question is, are these areas, can I give a list of those areas? I don't want to, because that defeats the whole purpose. I want people to do their own research. You should have the gumption to do something that is not fashionable today, but sings to you, resonates with you, it plays to your strengths. You will enjoy doing it, because of it plays to your strength, it sings to you, and you're willing to put in a lot of hard work when it is not fashionable. People saying, look, I'm earning more than you, I'm in this hot job, I go and travel here, people like me are the ones who are talked about in the media. This job is not so important, or this area is not so important. People who can train themselves to be those people in the shadows are the ones who will go mainstream in the future.
Help us understand, how do you stay personally top of your game ahead of all these information? What are some learning resources that you refer to like this?
It's very, so I think the challenge has been time, so it's in our today's world, it is very easy to get distracted.
Right.
So I don't watch any television. I don't have a Netflix connection, right? So I don't waste my time on this binge watching and stuff like that. So that saves me a lot of time. Second is that personality, a new tool that's called the Big Five, Ocean, that has come, and many people talk about it. And one of those dimensions, there are 5 dimensions, is agreeableness, disagreeableness. And it so turns out that disagreeableness is a very important part of success, because people who want to fit in, who are agreeable, they're the amplifiers of an idea. They're not the idea which initially they bring it to that level. Once you bring it to that level, of course, you need amplifiers. But to get it to that level, you have to fight with people who are disagreeing with you. You have to be comfortable being in that mode. So the agreeable people who are always trying to agree with everybody, people pleasers around them, right? They don't amount to much. They're good amplifiers. They're called evangelists, but they're not good creators. So therefore, you need to be able to surround yourself with people who are willing to challenge your thinking and say, no, I don't think this is well formed. A good example for that is somebody I say is the person that I know perhaps with the highest IQ is Lalitesh Katragada.
The co-founder of Google Maps, Google Map Maker.
Exactly. He is in a good way, in a happy way, a disagreeable person. You can throw something at him. He's not going to drink it, no matter who it comes from. Right? We have great mutual respect for each other. But that doesn't mean that my idea to him is going to have an easy passage inside Lalitesh. In fact, I go to him because I know it will not have an easy passage inside Lalitesh. So if it can pass the Lalitesh test, I must be thinking right? So you cultivate many, many Laliteshes in your life, right? Because they are the ones who will give you the power of rigorous thinking, your power to be able to think contrarian, out of the box, in a way that is rigorous, that will allow you to do that. Knowledge is available generally. Once you surround yourself with this set of people, knowledge will come to you, because knowledge is generally available. People will find stuff and share it with you. That's not so much of a problem. You want to find it, you will find it very easily. If you want to find something, as we use an example earlier, you want to be good at AI developer tools, and you want to find the 5 or 10 people who are most thoughtful about it. It'll take you a few days to get there, right? So that is not difficult. I think that is doable. What is less doable is having those people.
How do you have those people?
You see, there's a music festival going on in Chennai. In that audience are going to be people who are gourmet consumers of connoisseurs of music. They understand music inside out. Many of them themselves are practitioners of classical music, right? So that is a happy place to go for a musician, because you're surrounded by people who are informed buyers, who are demanding buyers, who are not going to accept your ideas for the sake of accepting ideas. This is why it's hard to be an iSPIRT volunteer. And also it's easy to be an iSPIRT volunteer. Some of our youngest volunteers who are under 30, they thrive because they're fearless. They think through their ideas carefully. They're able to find whatever they need to know. They're able to teach themselves what they want to know. So that doesn't come from an academic institution. That can come from any place that you like. That's available to anybody. You want to do the best course on AI, it is available online, right? So the point is that it's all that is available to you. Do you have the self-discipline to imbibe it? And then are you going to submit yourself to some of your friends who will tear your ideas apart? And through that process, a better thought process will emerge, a better idea will emerge, a better way of thinking will emerge. Then you apply that. Then when you start applying, the field, the market gives you its own feedback, right? And therefore you have to take that. So for that, you need something which is hard in our Indian culture. See, in our Indian culture, I think one of the things we should learn from Western culture is this notion, if you make a 2x2 and you say, do you have emotional certainty? Let's say you want to become an entrepreneur, right? And I ask you, what does your heart say? Do you really want to be an entrepreneur? Right? You say, yes, yes, I have emotional certainty, right? Then I say, your idea, how much confidence do you have in your idea? And you say, I have very high confidence. I know it's right. Is that a better situation? Or is, if he comes back and says, I think it's the right idea, but I'm not 100% sure. In other words, there is intellectual skepticism about the idea, but emotional certainty about the same idea. Entrepreneur to banna hi banna hai. But this idea, I'm not 100% sure. I'm reasonably sure. Which of the two will be able to consume the feedback that the market will give you?
The second one.
The second one. So you have to live in a quadrant of intellectual certainty and intellectual skepticism. If you can live in that quadrant, then you will, and only then will you learn from what the market or the world is telling you. We don't reward people who are confident about themselves and yet have intellectual skepticism. We have started equating confidence with both intellectual skepticism and emotional certainty. That is not the answer for our problem, right? So we have, and all this is in our, this is in our culture. I'm not saying anything which is not part of our culture, right? And this is what Yoga Sutras will tell you. And so we have to just return back in some sense to this basic wisdom that is there in our culture and go away from this shallow kind of an approach that has come in vogue and focus on then being the best version of ourselves as we go forward.
What are some books that you would suggest anybody, some books that had, major impact on your life, which you believe every young person should read?
See, to me, a book by Steven Pinker called The Blank Slate in 1997 had a big impact on me. And that is, he basically argues in that what proportion of us is really blank. It's shaped by nurture. That time the belief was that almost everything is shaped by the environment. And his argument was no, it's more 50-50. And then the question is that if it's 50-50, then some part of it is hardwired. Then if you can understand that hardwiring yourself, then your ability to organize your life around it can be successful. So the next book that goes in that same genre is a beautiful book it's called The Sports Gene. And The Sports Gene, he explains why human performance in sports has improved such a lot. And one of the three reasons he posits, and of course evolution is not one of them because evolution of course hasn't happened so quickly, is that people are choosing their body type and the sport that they play much better intuitively. So if they have a tall torso, then they do swimming. If they're tall, they have long limbs, they do basketball and so on and so forth. So similarly, if there is some part of it which is hardwired, I am more comfortable with abstract ideas versus creative ideas. Some people are comfortable only with creative ideas and not with abstract ideas. Some people are organized, some people are less organized. Some people are agreeable, some people are less agreeable. If you choose your life to accept who you are and then to play to your strength. So the person who is really, really the best mission controller in a space program is not the astronaut. And the astronaut is not the best mission controller, right?
Right.
So the best experimental physicist cannot become the best theoretical physicist or vice versa. So by being able to, in early years, spend time understanding yourself, and one of the tools available is this Big Five itself. And if you can spend that Big Five, I think it's called understandingyourself.com or whatever, many places it's available. But if you can use that in early years to say, this is really who I am. I am not a very agreeable person, but that is also my strength in some situations. I am a very agreeable person, And therefore, that is a strength in some other situations.
Right.
And then organize yourself to play the game that plays to your strength. Right? That alone puts you and improves your chances of success in life. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it? So those two books are a good starting point for people.
So in 2005, you had a controversial lecture. In 2023, sir, what is that one thing that you are contrarian about?
My sense is that if you have self-awareness, you can overcome lots of things. So of course, some self-awareness has to be at the individual level. Sometimes the organizational self-awareness is important. And sometimes at the nation level, culture level, self-awareness is important. So I think the conventional view is that it will be very difficult for India to become a significant power in pre-commercial R&D in many sectors. All the sectors that I talked to you. My view is that actually we'll adopt that very quickly if we can contextualize it to our Indian tradition. And I think we can. And by being able to link it up with a long historical basis, because in India, whether it's the Vedas or anything else, everything has been citizen created. It has been citizen research. Citizens came together to build the stuff and give it away, right? And so that itself is an example. If you go back in time, we were really good in astronomy. All our astronomy was citizen research. We didn't have organized research institutions where this happened. It was individuals coming together who did this everywhere, and they had a way to bring it all together. My feeling is that we will end up creating, with very little investment, like you see here, we need a little bit of research facilities because you need, places where you can do physical research. But with very little emphasis on facilities, a lot of it will be in silico. We will be able to create a large batch of high quality citizen pre-commercial research as we go forward. And I am beginning to see that happen in areas. And that, when coupled, because for India to thrive, we need that. We need to prime the pump with pre-commercial citizen research. Some of this will come back in the form of people coming back from the US. Many of us are in that category. But also it will happen because people then continue doing it on their own terms, on their own budget, in their own skunk works kind of settings. And I think that will grow big in India in a way that we don't fully anticipate today. And that, if that turns out to be right, that will end up becoming one of our big drivers of the next version of India that we need, that will allow us to overcome the middle income trap that we are likely to hit.
Who are some people which you believe are real contrarians, and who are some underdog startups which you believe are going to, ride this wave?
So good part is we are creating companies that are making money, product companies that are making money for their investors. Idea Forge is there. In Ather is doing it for EVs. Ola Scooters is another one. In every area we are beginning to do. What we are not doing is creating companies that are going to be in that circle of 5. That will be in that hens that we talked about. Right. That is a altogether different level. We are now beginning, another way to think of it, hum SARC games mein to acha kar rahe hain. Right, but doing well in SARC games is no proxy for doing well in Olympics. To go from doing well in SARC games to doing well in Olympics differently, it requires a different leap. And that has to be our focus. That has to be the orbit change that we focus. So we've come a long way, but that's the direction that we have to go. And I hesitate to point out companies because who knows what's going to happen. Market will decide. So we will see. All I can say, we will have winners in many areas as we go forward.
Thanks a lot, sir. Super grateful. I can't tell you the level of insights that I have watched, and I have to rewatch this. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, sir.